In this video, my goal is to show you how to make this Shamrock dish for candy or food. You can make it smaller, bigger, whatever you want, so that you can make it for St. Patrick's Day yourself. I actually made this dish last year, and I was going to put out a video talking about how to make it, and I got distracted and never got it out, so I decided to do it this year and use the video footage from last year. In this video, I'm going to talk about the following things. Let me get my notes out here. Key items in this video are, it uses Vectric software, just like most of my CNC videos. So it's a CNC. You could do the same thing with the template and a router, but I don't have a template available at this time. If you want me to put one together, I can do that. Let me know. So the key thing is I'm going to go through the Vectric software, go through the vector setup in the software. Then I'm going to go through the toolpaths you're going to use with those vectors, including the use of a roundover bit. Then I'm going to go from setting all those toolpaths up to the machine, and I'm going to go through the process of machining this dish. And in the end, I'll complete with the sanding and finishing, but I won't spend much time on that at all. If you stick around to the end and you're interested, I will tell you how you can go get a Vectric file yourself to make this if you would like before St. Patrick's Day. So stick around to the end. I'm not going to go from scratch about designing everything. Let me show you the design that I already have. I'm going to quickly turn off the layers so we can start from scratch. So let's start turning the layers on in the order that matter. So the first thing that I do is I have the Shamrock profile, which is the outside cut. The next thing I have is the Shamrock dish, which is what I'm going to cut as the dish. And you notice that I've taken time to fillet or round out these corners. And I could have done the same thing up here, but decided not to. I'll just let the bit diameter radius take care of that. And then I have the epoxy color. You will notice the epoxy color layer just outside of the dish layer and the outside profile. And that's because when I cut the Shamrock dish out, I'm actually going to cut into the epoxy. And when I cut the bowl, I'm going to cut along this line and cut into the epoxy. The goal is to go ahead and cut this Shamrock dish out and use a roundover so that I don't have to do that after I do the CNC work. So you're going to see me put a roundover path in here. Let's take a look at the toolpaths that I've set up. The first toolpath that I set up is the epoxy cut. For purposes of demonstrating what it's going to look like, I'm going to go ahead and put that depth at 0.05. When I go to set up the toolpath for real, that'll be 0.15. I'm using an end mill, a 1/4 inch end mill as a clearance, and a 1/8 inch end mill. I'm going to go ahead and select the vectors of importance. I like to make my toolpaths by vector layers, and so I'm going to go all closed vectors, associate with toolpath and the epoxy color, hit close, and you know it's going to expand past the profile cut and the dish cut. Once I have that, I hit calculate. And now if I want to see what that looks like, I'm going to turn the toolpath color green because that's what my epoxy color is going to be. Remember, it's only 0.05 deep, and I'm going to preview what that looks like. I'm actually carving this in walnut, so let's change that over to what it's going to look like in walnut. And if you haven't seen this video, go look for it. It tells you how to change the material color in your texture database, and I have already done that, so I'm going to select that, and so I'm going to put this on walnut, give me a better look. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to surface this board so it's nice and flat. Then I'm going to carve the epoxy pocket, put the epoxy in there and let it dry. And then the next thing after I do the epoxy pocket is I'm going to do a roundover. So my roundover, I like my 2052 plunge roundover. It gives me the most consistent results. Set that up, and I have a video on how to set up the roundover bits. If you haven't seen that video, you may want to go watch that one. I'll put a link in the description, and I'll try to remember to put a card in. And so I've got that all set up. On the outside, it's going to be 0.25, and we're going to not do any tabs. I'm going to put a little bit of a ramp in there, and the selector. Notice that I've picked the Shamrock profile. You can see the lines. So I've selected the profile cutout and the dish cutout. Hit calculate, and now let's see what the roundover looks like as we preview that. So as you see, that roundover it looks pretty nice. So the next one is the dish pocket. So I'm going to be using a bowl bit for my dish, and you'll notice that I put the thickness of the material, which is T, or it can be Z, T or Z, minus 0.25, which means it's going to cut all the way down up until a 1/4 inch. So that's going to have a 1/4 inch at the bottom of my bowl, which is what I want. I'm using the bowl bit, so I look at the selector. Notice I have the Shamrock dish selected. If we look over here, you can see that's inside of here, and it's inside, I want to point out, it's inside the green epoxy path. Hit close and hit calculate. No, the other thing I want to do, I'm actually going to switch the Z0 from the top up here down to the machine bed, and I'm going to calculate it that way. It says changing any of these settings means that all toolpaths must be recalculated. I don't want to do that because I do want to keep the roundover and the epoxy pocket at the surface. So I'm going to say no, but I am going to recalculate this one just to make sure. And then I'm going to hit preview visible. You'll notice when it carved it that the epoxy is no longer there, as well as a roundover, because it wants me to recalculate those toolpaths. I'll go ahead and recalculate them just so you can see it. But remember, when you see me at the machine, these are still going to be on the surface, these toolpaths. The dish pocket and the profile will be on the machine bed. So now I'll do the profile. So now I've tested all the toolpaths. There's a couple changes I want to make. One is I want to go ahead and change this to 0.15. Calculate that. Now I want to take these 3 toolpaths, which are zeroed on the top, and I want to go ahead and save those toolpaths to the thumb drive. So I'll go through and do all of that. You don't need to see that. Then the next thing I want to do is to set the Z0 at the machine bed. And the reason I want to do that is I want to be able to have the bottom of the dish stay right at 0.25 inches. And that's the best way to make that happen, number one. And number two, when I cut through the profile, I want to not necessarily cut into my spoiler bed. You'll notice I recalculated all of them. I've already saved these 3 toolpaths, so I'm not going to resave those again. And the only toolpaths that I'm going to need to save then, and let me preview it one more time, will be the dish pocket and the profile. And you'll notice I got tabs in there. So now that I've got those checked, I can go ahead and save those toolpaths using the save function. I'm not going to show you how to do that. I think you know how to do that. And then we'll move out to the machine. First thing we do at the machine is surface the board. And then I need to mark it so that I can know where my 0 is. So I'm marking it there. And I will always zero there. And remember, I zero off of a point where the epoxy won't get on there, so that I always have a consistent 0. And that's what you see me doing there. Then I go ahead and carve that first pocket that we're going to use for the epoxy pour. And remember, that's going to be bigger than the profile cut that I cut it out with, and also from the dish, so that when I cut those later cuts, they're going to cut the epoxy away. Well, now that we got this carved, the next step is to take this off the, I'm going to take this off the actual CNC and get it ready for pouring the green emerald epoxy. Simple as undoing the clamps. And so this is what this looks like at this time. I'll pour green epoxy in here, and then I'll come back and I will do the bowl. The next step is to get ready to pour the epoxy. So I moved up to my office. You can see the pigments I used up there in the corner. I'm mixing everything up to get it nice and mixed. Then I'm over there just pouring in the border that we talked about before. And you can see that I sped all this up because it's not very hard or scientific. I'm just pouring it in there. Then I'm going to stir it up some. I do have a video on how to swirl your epoxy, and that's up in the corner there, and I'll add a card. I noticed in the playback the video got kind of grainy. Sorry about that. That's what it looked like when the epoxy dried. We're at the point now where we're going to surface off that epoxy now that it's hardened. And then we can start our carves of putting in the round over the dish and then cutting it out. And what you see me doing is zeroing in the same location I always have. I start 0.5 millimeters above, and then I keep going back and forth, taking off 0.5 millimeters at a time until I'm happy with what it looks like. And that's what it looked like when I got done surfacing. Then I switch over from the slab slayer to my surfacing bit there to my bowl bit, and I start to cut the bowl in the dish. You'll notice I'm zeroing the bit on the machine bed to help make sure that I have a 1/4 inch on the bottom of the bowl, and also when I do my profile cut, I don't cut through into the wasteboard. So now the bowl looks pretty good, and after I do the bowl, I go ahead and switch over to my round over bit, and that's what you see me doing. I'm cutting the round over, and it also turned out pretty good. You'll see that here in a second. I'll do a close-up. Look how good that looked. That was my 2052 round over bit, and that's what it looks like up close. You can see a profile there on the left side of the screen. And then I started into sanding. The first thing I did was use a little sanding wheel that was attached to my drill to get inside the dish. And from there, I switched over to my Surf Prep sander, which is my favorite sander with some Pro Foam there. I went through a couple grits until I got to the Pro Foam level. And then I blew it all off to get most of the dust off, and I wiped it down with alcohol, denatured alcohol. And once I got done doing that, I moved into the finishing process. And in this case, this was back when I was using Odie's oil for everything. I applied Odie's oil liberally the way the instructions say, buffed it, and in the end, this is what it looked like. I think it looked pretty good. What do you think? Well, if you're at this point in the video, you stuck around to the end, thank you very much. That helps me quite a bit. I hope you learned a thing or two. I hope you learned about setting up the vectors. And if you want this file, as I promised, and you stuck it out to the end, and you give me the code word leprechaun, and send me an email at robsansomsdesigns@gmail.com, and I'll spell that out in the YouTube description. It's also in the contact info for my YouTube channel. I will send you the file. It will be a Vectric file. You'll need to make sure you get all of the toolpaths set up properly using bits you're going to use. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to drop me a line and I can walk you through the process. If you think I deserved it, please give me a like. If you want to see a future video of me doing shop projects such as CNC work, laser work, 3D printing work, who knows what's going to come up, subscribe to my channel because I do all kinds of different things. Have a great day until we meet in this medium again.